passed. Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. Council now becomes Committee of the Whole Council to consider the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for the debate and voting arrangements for the bill. Members have been informed that the committee will conduct a joint debate on the clauses and amendments, including the amendment to the long title. I now propose the question to you that the following clauses stand part of the bill. Clauses 1 to 5. The Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury will move his two amendments. The first amendment seeks to amend Clause 5. The second amendment seeks to make consequential amendment to the long title. Members may refer to the appendix to the script for details of the amendments. Members may now proceed to a joint debate on the clauses and the amendments, including the amendment to the long title. I will first call upon the Secretary to speak, but he is not required to move his amendments at this stage. Then I will call upon other members to speak. Upon the conclusion of the joint debate, the committee will first vote on the clauses with no amendment, so they stand part of the bill, and then deal with the Secretary's amendments according to the arrangements set out in the appendix to the script. Secretary. President, I shall move an amendment to Clause 5 of the bill and also the long title. The contents of the amendments have been circulated to members. On 15th of August, the FS announced a series of measures in order to tackle the very challenging internal and external environment, including raising the rebate ceiling from 75% to 100% for the tax rebate for salaries tax, tax under personal assessments, and profits tax, with a ceiling of $20,000 per case. This measure will benefit about 1.43 million taxpayers and enterprises, so they can save an extra $1.84 billion in tax payment. In order to implement the enhanced tax relief, we propose to amend Clause 5 in order to raise the rebate ceiling from 75% to 100%. Because of such an amendment, we also propose to amend the long title of the bill in order to reflect the purpose of the bill, which is to implement the tax relief for 2019. I urge members to support the amendment made by the administration. Does any member wish to speak? Mr. Tony Chair. Thank you. Chairman, we are now debating the committee stage amendments. This is to implement the announcement made by the FS on the 15th of August. He has proposed to enhance the relief measures, and that is for the assessment year 2019 to 2020, that the relief rate will be enhanced from 75% to 100% for salaries tax, tax under personal assessment, and also profits tax. But then each taxpayer and each enterprise will only have the relief up to $20,000 at most. As I said at the second reading debate, Mr. Chairman, many middle-class people and professionals felt that the enhancement of the percentage and also the relief measures, they felt unhappy about the actual amount because, as the Secretary said, the relevant amendment will benefit 1.43 million taxpayers and SMEs, but about 500,000 people may not be able to benefit from this relief measure. This is mainly because the present amendment does not enhance the actual amount allowed. I fail to understand why the administration does not also give consideration to amending the amount. I would therefore reiterate and remind the administration, actually I quoted those examples already during the second reading debate, and I will give you an example with regard to salaries tax and tax under PA. If you only have personal allowance and no other allowances, if the employees earns more than $33,000 a month, if the tax relief is up to 75%, he will already be able to benefit from the maximum amount of $20,000. Therefore, even if you enhance it to 100%, it doesn't mean that there will be any extra help to these people. Even if you have dependent parent or children allowance, then perhaps you can earn up to $40,000 or so, and then you will already benefit from the ceiling, $20,000. Therefore, enhancing it from 75% to 100% does not mean any extra benefit or support for these people. As the Secretary said, at the original percentage of 75%, it is said that 1.91 million taxpayers and self-employed people will benefit. And then if you enhance it to 100%, then 1.43 million people will benefit, but then 500,000 people will not benefit in any way. And even for those who benefit, some of them may be able to pay a few $100 less, or some may be paying less than $100 less. So why don't you do a little more and enhance the ceiling to what you did the year before, that is $30,000. Now that we are faced with such a challenging environment, I believe such requests are not unfounded. In the past few months, the FS launched different rounds of relief measures for different industries. He focused on transportation, import-export industries, and also workers who may face unemployment or underemployment. This time around, you enhanced the percentage, but for the middle class and professionals, they benefit so little from it, or in fact, they derive no benefit from it at all. So can I ask the Secretary again, why is it that you only enhance the percentage but not the actual amount? Is it that you don't have to care about the middle class? Is it that they are not facing any difficulties?
Well, in fact, everybody in Hong Kong is faced with huge difficulties. Of course, I know that the Inland Revenue Department is waiting for the passage of this bill so that the IRD can issue the demand notes, and then they can complete the work, and so they await the third reading of the bill. We don't want to delay the rebate to reaching the public, so I'm not going to object to the amendment. But I look forward to the administration in giving us more in the coming financial year. But of course, I will also welcome further short-term relief measures in the near future. Please think about the middle class, the SMEs. Otherwise, they'll have the impression that the government has ignored their needs and the government is not extending a helping hand to them. Well, Chairman, whether the government will listen to us and try to provide relief measures to the middle class? Well, in fact, the government should stop the violence. That's even more important than coming up with more relief measures. Nowadays, people dare not go out during weekends. They are not willing to spend money. And everybody is like Cinderella. That is, we have to return home before the MTR service is suspended every night. Well, we have to think hard. The people of Hong Kong should have their freedom of movement and freedom of speech being protected by the basic law. And in fact, we are supposed to have our personal safety and our private property ownership being safeguarded by the basic law. It seems that all such rights and freedoms have been eroded. Mr. Tony Chair, please come back to the subject matter. Yes, I will, Chairman, but basically I've finished with what I want to say. I just want to ask the government to do more so that Hong Kong can become once again an inclusive, stable, prosperous, and safe city like before. So I spoke, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Wong Ting-kwong. Well, for this bill, that is the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. We are now in the committee stage, and we are looking at clauses 1 to 5 as well as the amendment to the long title. On my part, I support the bill. Well, the purpose of the bill is to support the enterprises, safeguard the jobs, and ease the burden of the public. As I have said during my in my speech during the second reading debate, I think it is only a stopgap measure. It is not going to root out the problem. For the latter, I think what we have to do is to suppress the violence so that we can live a decent life and we can be safe. Regarding the technical amendments proposed by the Secretary, I will urge the Secretary to listen carefully. According to the existing Inland Revenue Ordinance, for your personal income, which is subject to series tax, well, of course, we are entitled to a personal allowance, and you may claim a dependent parent allowance and children's allowance. Well, it is 2% on the first $50,000, 6% on the next $50,000, 10%, and then 14% on the next $50,000, and then the top rate would be 17%. So the tax band is $50,000, and then the tax rate would change. Well, on such a basis, when we look at the personal allowance, and if you look at the annual income, after taking away your allowances, if you earn 223,500 or below, then you can fully benefit from the maximum of $20,000 as the tax rebate proposed here. That's how I come to the figures. Well, it means that you have to make more than 223,500 after deducting all sorts of tax allowances before you would enjoy the full amount of $20,000. Of course, enterprises can also claim the tax rebate. For profits tax, we know that there is a difference between the tax-paying corporations or unincorporated businesses. We may be talking about sole proprietorship. Now, for the first $2 million for a limited company, the tax rate is 8.25% for profits tax. For unlimited companies, it is 7.5%. Profits beyond $2 million will take you to a tax rate of 16.5% for limited company, 18 15% for an unlimited company. In other words, in the case of the business sector, when it comes to profits tax, for a limited company, you have to make $2.21 million to get the full benefit. And then in another case, it would be $2.23 million to be your amount of profits. I would like to urge the Secretary to listen to me. For the year 2018-2019, now we are offering a tax rebate, but not everybody can make full use of the ceiling of $20,000. I would like the Bureau to do the following. Let me set aside the question whether $20,000 is an adequate amount, whether it can meet the needs of the public. Let me just stick with the figure of $20,000. Now, my suggestion is that if somebody cannot fully benefit from the maximum amount of $20,000, the balance should be allowed to be carried forward to the year 2019-2020. So it's a matter of being brought forward. In other words, 2018, 2019, and 2019, 2020 should be treated together. Any unused balance from the previous year should be allowed to be carried forward to the second year of assessment. Well, things don't look good. And 2019-2020 is a year very different from the previous year. It was only in June this year that we started to get the social unrest, and it is getting worse and worse. And as of today, we don't know when the violence can be stopped. Therefore, for the YA 2019-2020, I would like to make such arrangements for the $20,000. That is, if it hasn't been fully made use of in the previous year, 2018-2019, taxpayers should be allowed to have it carried forward to 2019-2020. Secretary. Now, for this IR Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019, my suggestion has not been incorporated into the bill. Secretary, I will urge you to take my proposal seriously. In future, I look forward to your decision. I just wonder if you can come up with another amendment so that you allow the unused balance to be carried forward to the year 2019-2020. I'm sure if the government is to do that, it will be welcome by the taxpayers. Well, to be frank with you, for the salary class, they don't usually have to pay a lot. And in terms of the million or so taxpayers, I think the majority of them cannot make full use of the maximum amount of $20,000. If you are to pick up my proposal and introduce this arrangement, then you are going to benefit many more taxpayers, and the outcome will be much more effective. Now, the SAR government has already set aside the provision to cover the revenue forgone as a result of the $20,000 each. So why don't you take a step more and allow the taxpayers of service tax or profits tax, Since in any event they are not paying a huge sum of tax, why don't you let them make full use of the tax rebate in 2 years? So, Chairman, I hope the government will take on board my proposal. Thank you. Next, Mr. Lee. Mr. Chairman, as I have said in my second reading speech, well, at first the bill proposed to have a tax rebate of 75%. Later on, it was increased to 100%. Everybody knows why. That's all because of the unrest in Hong Kong, and all sectors and industries have been negatively affected. So the government has tried to help. But then the most important point is to stop the violence and restore the rule of law, and shops should not be vandalized, and then we should be free from violence. So that's the overriding concern. Against such a background, we know that the FS as well as the SFST have come up with all sorts of relief measures for different sectors. Now, for the amendment, this is to enhance the relief measure first introduced. Yes, we have had a few more rounds of relief measures. I would like to tell you that publicly we have already voiced our support, and I just urge the Secretary to respond to what I'm going to say. Now, a few industries would like to have more relief measures. Please give us a positive reply, or at least tell us that you're going to talk to such industries and let them air their grievance, and then in due course you come up with some support measures for them. First of all, the tourism industry. Well, the tourism industry was hardest hit by the protests arising from the anti-amendment exercise. Well, if you know, then you must know that the tourism industry has seen a downward trend in the number of arrivals. Mr. Yu Ziwing wrote to the FS. The FS took on board some of his proposals, and in addition, he has got many other proposals, but I'm afraid they haven't been agreed to by the FS, and I hope that the Secretary in a moment can tell us what you would do about the other proposals. Are you going to keep on talking to the industry? I think they need more than just a tax rebate. They would like to have the rent waiver, like what the Housing Authority or the Cyberport have done, because the government is the landlord, and then the rent should be cut by 50%. I think many shop owners would like the government to take the lead to do so, so that other major landlords like the Link Rich would also do the same. But the government hasn't done this, and I hope that the FST will give us an answer. Don't dismiss it by saying that it is irrelevant.
Because if you discuss with the different sectors, such as the tourism industry that I just referred to, you will understand that they're in dire straits. So rent reduction is a strong demand coming from them. And apart from that, I also noticed airline companies may need to lay off staff to resolve the operational difficulties. And there is a suggestion for the airport authority to waive the landing fee and the berthing fee for airliners. And you can respond to that as well, perhaps, Secretary. As for the drastic drop in tourist arrival figures, well, Mr. Yu isn't here at the moment, but very often I also get in touch with the industry. For inbound tours, well, although there is a demand for the number of tours to be reduced, at the moment they are facing difficulties and they have 6 requests. One, the administration should subsidize local tours to be joined by Hong Kongers, and for tour escorts and coach drivers, they want the administration to create opportunities for them, and there should also be an emergency relief fund to provide assistance to the frontline practitioners.
Well, I haven't verified this piece of news, but recently there has been a wounding case, probably due to the employment difficulties. So for the unemployed, there should be assistance, and reference should be made to what happened in 2003. Frontline practitioners undertaking specified courses should receive subsidy to encourage them to equip themselves with new skills. The retail industry and the catering industry belong to the second victim. Well, because of the social unrest, Causeway Bay, Mong Kok, Tsim Sha Tsui, businesses there are severely hampered. And just now during lunch, we were having we patronized a restaurant in CITIC Tower, and the boss also told us the same. Mr. Tommy Zhang delivered a speech, and I noticed that if it happens, your employees will need to take no-pay leave, and over 1,000 restaurants will collapse. Earlier, you discussed with major landlords, and only a couple of them agreed to rent reduction. Unless we turn off all the electricity, water, aircon, etc., it would be difficult for restaurants to survive. That should be 100% get. Well, Mr. Sarili, please come back to this debate. We should focus on the amendment. Yes, I already stated that I'm going to support the bill and the amendments, but then the different sectors are facing unsurmountable challenges. I want the Secretary to make it clear that the administration will support them, including rent reduction and a 100% guarantee. Well, anyway, this is the first time I speak on this bill. I hope you give me some time. The third sector I'd like to talk about is the transportation sector. The government just announced a third series of relief package measures, including fuel subsidy for 6 months for taxis and coaches for commercial vehicles. The one-off $5,000 subsidy will be provided. Well, when I set up street stalls to hold campaigns, I also listened to the grievances expressed by taxi drivers. Although the government has responded positively to their requests, the government should also improve the business environment for them. But of course, this involves LegCo's operation. We need the Finance Committee's funding approval. So apart from the transportation sector, let me turn to construction industry. Earlier, a press conference was held. I understand that we have outstanding FC items to be approved, amounting to over $70 billion, and these projects include hospitals, welfare facilities, etc. And many construction workers are out of job because of the situation in the Finance Committee. Some workers are either overworked or underemployed. So different trades and industries I just mentioned are in dire straits, including the construction industry. Secretary, apart from raising the tax reduction rate from 75% to 100%, can you tell us what you have in mind to help these trades and industries? I so submit, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Michael Look. Thank you, Chairman. At this committee stage, I'm speaking on the Inland Revenue Amendment Tax Concessions Bill 2019. And I'd like to explain in detail why I support the amendment and also share my view on public finance. In fact, there are two stages of amendment to this bill. In the first stage, our public coffers were flushed, and we recorded over $100 billion of surplus in the public coffers. And the government's philosophy is to offer tax rebates to taxpayers. And then originally, the rebate rate would be set at 75%. That is for salaries tax, tax under personal assessment and profits tax. And then the second stage arrived in the middle of August because of what happened since June. Our economy was hampered. Different industries and sectors were affected. We have had shops closing down and people being driven out of jobs. And under the enhanced measure, the rate increased from 75 to 100%. I support that, but in terms of public finance, can we adopt some new thinking? Must we always resort to tax rebates to taxpayers only? Will that suffice? Over the past few years, the administration has adopted the same stance. When the government records a surplus in its revenue, tax rebates will be offered. Sometimes the ceiling could be as high as $30,000. For welfare recipients, they will receive different kinds of subsidies, including waiver of rent, etc., or double the payment. But we do have those paying just a small amount of tax, or that these households or grassroots or the sandwich class may not be making a lot of money. They may be living in public housing, and in terms of the government's fiscal policy and in previous budgets, these are the people who did not benefit from them. Well, last time the government offered the cash handouts of $4,000 and it sparked such controversy. And in fact, I've received complaints from some members of the public that they haven't even received the $4,000. So the government offers relief to the higher echelon by offering tax rebates, and the government provides allowances and subsidies to the lowest class. What about the middle class? This is a problem troubling us because uneven distribution of government resources would antagonize a lot of people. So I support this amendment, but the government should also spend some time to think about the following. That is, in face of different stages of the economic cycle, how can the government allocate resources in an appropriate manner so that everyone gets a share of our economic success? The government should not ignore a large group of people or distribute resources unevenly. In fact, the government has never even tried to set up a dividend distribution mechanism. I can give you the example of Singapore. There is a formula. Whenever the government records a certain level of surplus, rebates will be offered to the public. The government already has data relating to the bank accounts and the identities of the public, so there is no need to increase the workload of a particular department, as there may be errors and more complaints, and the public needs not wait long before payments are disbursed. And there is also a collective economy with the distribution of dividends concept. We always talk about operational surplus. This is akin to the concept of the government running a company with operations, and when there is a surplus, the public would get a dividend. It is also akin to buying stocks, and dividends would be paid out. And the government should set up a similar dividend payout mechanism so that every member of society would be a stakeholder, and that there would be fair and equal treatment for everybody. It would be reasonable with a very low administrative cost. I think the government should mull over this. Otherwise, there will be a happy trouble whenever the government records huge surpluses. This could also lead to a political crisis, in fact. Well, in this extradition bill saga, we've seen the erosion of confidence in the government by the public. In fact, the $4,000 cash handout is the last straw on the camel's back. The people are angry because the government couldn't even get the job done, and it should be as simple as handing out $4,000. So there is a confidence crisis. Now, back to the fiscal policy, increasing the tax rebate rate from 75% to 100% is by and large a relief measure. Just like any relief measure, in principle, we're all in support. That's why almost everybody voted yes just now. In terms of relief measures, I do have mixed feelings. Tax rebates, of course, is one way, but we can take a more targeted approach. And in fact, to stimulate internal spending is another way. What is meant by accurate relief measure or targeted relief measure? Chairman, I need to praise the government for introducing a fuel subsidy for the transportation sector. This is targeted relief for the sector because in the past few months, due to political violence and the incidents, the whole economy and especially the sector has had a very bleak outlook. And in fact, the FTU mentioned that for taxis and minibuses, their income dropped by 30–40%. We used to need to wait a long time for a taxi, but now taxis wait for us. And for taxis running on LPGs, the unit price will drop by $1. Some taxi drivers commented that it is not sufficient, but at least it offers some relief because every month they'll be able to save $1,000, and for half a year they'll be able to save $6,000. So, say for LPG, the unit price would drop by $1, and what is more important is that during the recent incidents affecting different sectors, we have the tourism sector, retail, hotel, accommodation, etc. People are driven out of jobs.
These people work from hand to mouth. They need to support parents and then the spouse and children. What should they do? If you ask these people to get unemployment CSSA from the SWD, it's psychologically very difficult for them. They are proud that they are Hong Kong citizens. They have been working hard their whole life. They were self-reliant, but then suddenly they may have to apply for unemployment allowance under CSSA, and then they will be assigned job interviews. Why don't you consider an emergency unemployment fund? You can set aside some money for just a limited period of time. The Labor and Welfare Bureau has told us that in overseas countries, the unemployment insurance is the product of long-term contribution. Well, I understand the nature may be different, but the FTU is proposing an emergency unemployment fund, and this will only benefit anyone for half a year, and you should go for the median income for that person. And at most he gets will be 80% of what he used to get from his own job. I hope you can consider doing this if there is money in the coffers. Apart from dishing out goodies, how can you sow seeds in the market to stimulate internal demand? We consulted the tourism industry trade unions. They said that the measures announced yesterday were too piecemeal. We should do more to attract tourists to come to Hong Kong. Who are hit most? They are the local. Mr. Michael Look, please come back to this debate. Yes, I'm talking about public finance management. I'm giving you examples and how you should use money to help the employees and also the entire market. I'm giving you these examples. We have said that Hong Kong people should be making trips in Hong Kong. You should support Hong Kong people to take local trips, maybe one-day trips, or you can go to Cheung Chau and live in a hotel. And maybe if you live on Hong Kong Island, you can go to Gold Coast in Tuen Mun. You can spend a night in the hotel and you can enjoy the leisure. If you make a trip, of course, you will also have to patronize the eating establishments, and it would also make people happy. It's important for people to have happy sentiments because this will give them positive energy. So it is important to stimulate internal demand. And you can also expedite government projects. This is also within the concept of public finance management, how the government can help to ignite hope in such difficult times. Well, the most important thing is to stop violence and curb the riots. How can we return authority to the rule of law? The rule of law means it is a kind of authority. People must obey laws. You should not think that it is something to be proud of if you break the law. We need to give back authority to the rule of law. Then we can protect our freedom. Mr. Michael Look, please come back to the debate. Yes, Chairman. If we can protect our freedom, then as a free economy, we can then protect revenue, government revenue. Why I say this? The important thing is that we should have the freedom of not having to fear. We must have freedom to conduct our business. We should not be attacked because of the background of certain directors. We should have the freedom to go out. We should not be afraid that in certain districts there will be continuous demonstrations or rallies or violent unrest. Then when we have freedom, our economy can come back to the right track, and then the government will have stable revenue, and only then can we achieve what I said during the second reading debate, which is the tax system reform, so we can have continuous stable revenue and not rely solely on land and property. We really hope that even if I support these amendments, through you, Chairman, I hope the Secretary has heard me about my proposal to introduce new thinking into the tax system reform so we can see new opportunities for Hong Kong. Mr. Tommy Cheung. Chairman, just now I heard the FTU talk about emergency unemployment fund and the plight of employees because they might lose their job. Actually, employees in the catering industry are even worse off. They are not unemployed, but they have no wages. They have no transportation. They walk 2 hours to go back to work, but there are no guests, and then they will have to pull the gates because people might rush in, break everything, and start fires. They do not know where to run to, and their family members worry about their safety. And this is not only happening on weekends. Sometimes this happens on weekdays as well. The unemployment rate, therefore, does not reflect the actual underemployment situation of the catering industry. They actually come back to work, but then there are no guests. There is no business. Coming back to this bill, Chairman, the Liberal Party, of course, supports the enhancement to the tax relief measure for personal assessment tax, salaries tax, and profits tax for the year of assessment 2018 to 2019 by raising the ceiling to 100%. But then, unfortunately, the actual amount is capped at $20,000 per case. The Liberal Party would like to quibble about this because we had asked for increasing the ceiling to $40,000. Before the amendment, there would be 1.91 million salaries taxpayers and people who pay tax under PA, and then 145,000 tax-paying corporations and unincorporated businesses stand to gain. But even if you raise it to 100%, I don't think many more people will benefit. Just look at salaries tax. They may be paying $250 to $5,000 less, according to the second quarter for 2019 released by the Census and Statistics Department, and that is the Comprehensive Household Income Survey. There are 3.89 million people working in Hong Kong, not including domestic helpers from other countries. If the administration is happy to take on our LP views, if the ceiling is enhanced to $40,000 instead of $20,000, then those people who earn $28,000 a month, they will be able to have the entire amount. And then if you raise it to $40,000, then 350,000 people who earn $28,000 to $39,500 will also stand to gain. In today's Hong Kong, if you earn $40,000 a month, you are still under a lot of burden. They face high rents, high property prices, high transport prices. They face a lot of pressure in their life, but they seldom get any help from government. In terms of housing, education, and looking after their parents, they will not have much left for their own spending. Perhaps they may be worse off than people who have different kinds of subsidy, including those in public housing. They are the ones who earn middle-class income, but then their life is like the life of grassroots. If you relieve them of the tax burden by $20,000 or $30,000, but if you average it out throughout the year, it is just like $3,000 a month, and that can be used just for tuition fees for their children or having a foreign domestic helper to look after their parents. Now, of course, we are sitting on a very healthy fiscal reserves to the tune of $1,100 billion. And then in Hong Kong now we are in dire straits. Why don't you dish out more goodies to the public? In March last year, when the FS read out the budget for 2018-2019, only 75% of the salaries tax was going to be returned. Still, the ceiling was set at $30,000. So many marginal middle-class people also benefited. But of course, in that year, there was a very huge and handsome surplus. But then, given the present state of things in Hong Kong, why don't you walk another step? As for the business sector, well, do I need to say more? The Liberal Party would like the administration to immediately stop the charging of holding tax, and also whatever is regarded as surplus after deducting the actual tax to be paid last year should be returned. This will certainly help businesses. This kind of tax is a kind of holding tax, and given the present situation, businesses will certainly make much less profit and you have to return the holding tax sooner or later. Why don't you do it sooner than later? And then they can face this very difficult time. That is, if they can benefit from the return of provisional tax. Well, actually, I talked about a credit guarantee scheme. Let me say again to you that you can certainly consider this as a relief measure because we are already in deep waters, especially the micro and SMEs. We are really in deep waters. There would be more micro enterprises and SMEs which may have to wind up because they can't survive anymore. And during the SARS period, in fact, you did the same for them. At that time, you applied for provision from the Finance Committee, and then you said that you would have a $3.5 billion fund in order to set up the credit guarantee scheme so that authorized institutions under the banking ordinance would be able to help retail shops, tourist coach operators, and also cinemas and karaokes and other enterprises. It is also noted then that the loans given would have to be used for paying 3 months' salaries for their employees, and there will be a cap for hotels and catering industry, $1 million. Tourism and tourist coach operators, $500,000. Retail shops, cinemas, and karaoke bars, $300,000. The breakthrough about this scheme is that there will be 100% guarantee for specified industries. Then this will allow banks and lending institutions to stand down and be reassured in giving out loans. Please do not think that this is a very low threshold. At that time, even if it is 100% guarantee, the applicants have to have valid business registration and they have been in business for a year, and the eating establishments must have another half year of valid operation. And then applicants would have to provide documents to lending institutions and also specific balance sheets so that they are not the subject of any bad loans or they have no outstanding loans. And also, their business turnover must have dropped by 30% at least before they can be eligible. Therefore, the design of the system will mean that it would actually help those enterprises that are actually affected by SARS. I hope you will make reference to that and look at Hong Kong's actual situation so you can increase the guarantee scheme and the subsidy period can be enhanced from 3 months to 6 months so that the loan repayment period can be made longer and people can repay interest first before they repay the capital, and also the interest should be limited for the loans.
I think the difficulties that we are facing are worse than this SARS period. If you want to support enterprises and safeguard the jobs, all the more you have to listen to me. Give the enterprises a loan so as to pay the employees. We have a precedent. It has been proven to be effective. Today, the Liberal Party does not intend to block the amendment moved by the administration. But I earnestly hope that the administration will listen to us and understand the difficulties faced by the middle class and the grassroots. If the economy doesn't improve, there should be more relief measures. Secretary, let me share with you some alarming figures. For the same shopping mall, August, September, shopping malls have seen 30% less business, and yet for the month of October, a drop of 50% just for a month. Now, we're supposed to have good business in this quarter. For the business to suffer in this way, it means that they cannot expect to even out their revenue. They're supposed to have brisk business round about this time of the year. So it is quite hopeless, and they are afraid that they can't survive till April next year. Well, the rate of decrease is something that is really surprising to someone like me who's so very experienced. Now I'm worried about the employees. The boss may not be able to pay the wages of the employees because of the lack of business, or the boss has run out of cash. So I think it's timely for you to come up with a loan. If the loan is to be earmarked for the payment of wages, it is also worth your while to set up something like an unemployment emergency fund or unemployment assistance. Well, I don't know by how much the wages have come down, but I'm sure the rate is falling all the time. So I speak. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Martin Leong. Mr. Chairman, in relation to the Inland Revenue Tax Concession Amendment Bill 2019, the government has come up with a CSA so as to give effect to what the FS has announced on the 15th of August in relation to the fresh round of relief measures to help Hong Kong meet with the external and internal challenges. Well, for the tax rebate, for the year 2018-2019, the rate will be enhanced from 75% to 100%. And then the ceiling is being kept at $20,000 in each case. I support and welcome such a move. I believe that citizens and enterprises would also welcome such a measure. They also hope that the government will implement this as soon as possible. Almost 2 million citizens and tax-paying enterprises will get some genuine benefits so as to help them to meet with the uncertainties in this very volatile environment. Well, service tax, profits tax, and tax under personal assessment are being sort of given a tax rebate. I don't think it is going to be ineffective. The amount is not the same as last year. Well, I understand that this is a sum of $19 billion in relation to tax foregone, but it means a lot to the taxpayers, and the taxpayers were encouraged to spend and consume. In turn, industries will be given support. Say, for example, the retail, catering, and tourism industries, which have been hardest hit in the recent social unrest. Well, for the tax rebate to be enhanced from 75% to 100%, it is going to reap benefits. It will stimulate the economy. It is going to boost the morale of the society. For the profits tax, well, I think the business sector will welcome this so as to survive the storm. Well, for the GDP figures for the third quarter, I don't think we should be optimistic about that. I think it is unavoidable that we will go into an economic recession. Now, for the tax rebate, the percentage has been raised to 100%. However, as far as the absolute figure is concerned, the government is merely foregoing $1.9 billion. So I don't think the government will need to forego $3 billion when the rate is raised to 100%. I think it is a small amount of money, but then it is not enough help for the 330,000 SMEs. Now maybe they could make some money in the first half of the year, but not so in the second half of the year. So when average out, they are not able to benefit from the tax rebate. I hope the Bureau will pay close attention to the development of the economic outlook. while you uphold the principle of prudent public finance management, when it is appropriate, please introduce some timely relief measures. In addition, I think the government should find ways to help Hong Kong turn into a regional headquarters as well as the Treasury Center for the Greater Bay Area, as well as the business opportunities arising from the Belt and Road Initiative. It's much better to create favorable environments and provide opportunities than direct subsidies. We should encourage more multinational corporations to come here to set up their regional headquarters and to set up their corporate treasury centers. And I know that it will be helpful if we can provide concessionary profits tax rates to enterprises that can boost our development of innovation technology. Mr. Chairman, the U.S.-China trade war is escalating. And in Hong Kong, we haven't yet restored calm, so our prospect is most pessimistic. I don't think the administration should introduce short-term measures only. I think the government should have in mind a fourth or fifth round of stimulus packages. This may aggravate the deficit of our public finance, but I'm sure by helping the citizens, very soon we will embrace the rainbow after the storm. So I spoke, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Monica Chen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I spoke during the second reading debate for the IR Tax Concession Amendment Bill 2019. This is to give effect to the proposal in the last budget. The purpose is simple. This is to ease the tax burden of the taxpayers. It was supposed to be one-off relief, and then the series tax under personal assessment and profits tax will be reduced by 75% up to $20,000 per case. We're supposed to resume the second reading debate before the summer recess. At that time, the government didn't propose any CSAs. It was hoped that this could be introduced as soon as possible so that the IRD could beat the deadline to issue the demand note to the taxpayers covering the final tax payable by the taxpayers. As a result, people can make the necessary arrangements. The government thought that 1.9 million taxpayers paying series tax and tax under PA, as well as 445,000 enterprises benefiting from it. In other words, a total of 2.045 million taxpayers will benefit, and then the tax foregone will be $19 billion, among which $17 billion for individual taxpayers, the rest for the enterprises. The reality is, on the contrary, as a result of what happened in the society, we were unable to hold meetings on the 1st of July, and unprecedentedly, we saw the chamber being vandalized, and so the second reading debate could not be resumed. Yesterday, we started to resume the second reading debate, and members spoke yesterday and today. From what they said, I think nobody is opposing the bill. So the administration did try to see if more could be introduced before the passage of the bill, so as to help the public to deal with the problems. The Bureau asked to have a meeting with them, and then there was this proposal that whether a the clear message can be sent to the taxpayers on their demand note, so that they can have a look of the final tax payable. This will be a piece of good news to them. It will, to some extent, boost morale. It is good intention, and I think it is commendable. I think the administration has never imagined that in June and July, our economy was hard hit, and then the impact was across the board. Catering, retail, etc. were all affected. The jobs were vulnerable. And took the tourism industry as an example. The protest started in June, and the number of arrivals has been decreasing all the time, 30% in July, and then for the first 10 days of October, the number has been cut by 50%. And then as a result of the events lately, even the citizens do not want to travel overseas. And so even for outbound travels, it has dropped by 30%. So even the tour guides and tour escorts are not having enough work. And for taxi drivers, as a result of the continuing protests, and then the MTR service has been suspended before midnight. So a lot of transport workers have seen a fall in the income by up to 30%. And then for the Hong Kong Productivity Council, I think it has just issued some findings. In relation to the Composite Business Index, it has dropped by 7.6%, and now it is a drop of 31.4%. And then for some particular categories, I think the impact is even more significant. In other words, the sentiments of the business sector, in particular the SMEs, are really very pessimistic. Maybe we have some relief measures, but I don't think we can sort of offset all the negative impacts. Now, for the unemployment figures, usually they lag behind the economic cycles. We can't rule out that the unemployment rate will go up, and we can't rule out the possibility of massive laying off of employees. So against such a background, on the 15th of August this year, the administration started to come up with further relief measures. So the tax rebate has been revised from 75% to 100% for service tax, etc. But then the maximum amount has been maintained at $20,000. We are told that this would benefit 1.43 million taxpayers and save them a lot of money. But it means that 610,000 taxpayers cannot have further benefits from this latest proposal. I don't have all the details, and therefore, quite unlike what I have said in my second reading debate, I cannot sort of analyze the actual benefits to be reaped by different sectors. 1.33 million taxpayers will no longer have to pay tax this year. That's according to the SFST. So according to the number of taxpayers given by the Bureau, I don't see any reason not to support the bill.
However, I need to point out that many members mentioned in the second reading debate and at the CSA stage debate other suggestions. For example, raising the ceiling from $20,000 to $30,000. I hope the Secretary could give us figures to support this argument. The one-off tax reductions offered by the government could help relieve the burden on the public, especially the low-income class. But we should also pay attention to one phenomenon. Since year 2001, salaries tax have been contributing a smaller portion to the government revenue. The aging of population will continue to trouble our City. Our workforce will shrink from 59.7% to 55% by 2027 or 51.6% thereafter. The government set up a population policy committee to deal with the issues such as public policies relating to the aging population and the long-term financial commitment. Will this lead to upward adjustment of our tax rate or reduction of tax allowances? It is undecided, but it is very difficult for the government not to rely on profits tax and just salaries tax. This will cause a narrowing of our tax base. In 2017-2018, only 7% of enterprises did not pay profits tax, down by 50% comparing to the 17% 10 years ago. From March 2008 to March 2018, the number of registered corporations increased by 100%, as these corporations of a smaller scale, and as we all know, the failing rate of SMEs tend to be on the high side. These enterprises are not really profitable and therefore not paying profits tax. According to the Financial Secretary, in 2017, the tax policy unit under the SOS Bureau would be transferred to the Financial Secretary's office for three objectives. We need to leverage on our taxation policy to increase the competitiveness of Hong Kong and to increase government revenue. The priority should be given to boosting the industries and diversifying our economic base with tax policy. I look forward to any new policy introduced by the government. But I need to emphasize that apart from the $18 billion tax relief package followed by an enhanced package worth $1.84 billion, the government should also consider using the public money in a prudent manner in the long term. Well, we have $1.1 trillion of surplus in the public coffers. Our public coffers are flushed, but we may need to roll out different relief measures in the future. When our recurrent government revenue is under threat, it is questionable whether one day our public coffers will dry up. The government officials should look into this issue. It is about 7:30 already. I don't think we can complete the rest of the procedure, so I'll adjourn the meeting until next Wednesday, 11 a.m.